What's up, and welcome back to Nowstalgia Pod, quarantine edition number 10, 9, somewhere up there. My name is Pat Sheehan, joined by my trusty co-host who always outwits, outlasts, and outplays the other podcasters, Dave Martin Swagger. Dave, how you doing, man?
Saved all my fire tokens for this moment, man. We're here. Survivor Season 40 over.
Getting those three advantages. Just like Natalie, you're back in the game, dog. So we're gonna be talking quite a few things this week. We got some music. We obviously have some TV, maybe a movie. We'll see how we feel for you here at the end. But before we get going, hit that subscribe if you're on YouTube. So that's youtube.com/nostalgiapod. Go to soundcloud.com/nostalgiapod to find the podcast any way you want to, and especially iTunes follows, subscriptions, and reviews really help. Follow us on Twitter at NostalgiaPod. Dave, as you mentioned, Survivor Season 40, Winners at War. You tuned back in for the first time in how long for this?
So I had to do some digging to figure that out exactly. I think it's been about 10 years. I think I stopped watching around 2009, 2010, around there. And it was basically just out of my mind until I want to say maybe last year, 2019, when there's some controversy and ethical questions started popping up with the show, and it got back on my radar, and I heard about the all winners season, and then I heard that people I remembered were returning, and that piqued my interest, and here we are. It was pretty good. I'm happy to be back.
Well, I'm glad that you're back too, man, because this was a hell of a season. I had tuned into Survivor very early on, like right when it first began, but then kind of tuned out when we got to college. But I tuned back in for I think the last 5 or 6 seasons. So really, as the game has evolved with hidden immunity idols on the island, obviously. They introduced fire tokens, and extinction was a one-time thing that they then brought back for this season. So this season they brought back 20 past winners, one of the most competitive seasons of reality TV I think I've ever seen. And man, what was I think so fantastic about this show is that, well, one, there's just so much strategy at play constantly within this season 40 that they almost just didn't have enough time to show all the moving parts every time, leaving I think so much to be desired for just the other things going on the island. Like I know we've talked about this, but like just seeing like their life outside of the strategy of the game. But it was such a strategy packed season that it was quite a show. What did you like about the season? What were you glad that you tuned in for?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's just the top level gameplay, the strategy of it all. I think in past seasons, the disparity in like Survivor IQ can sometimes lead to landslide wins, like Kim's past win. So I've been told. But yeah, in this case, it was. I feel like mistakes were magnified. Think of people like Danny or Adam, and then successful strategy actually was need to be better than normal to actually make it in season 40. So it's pretty nuts. But yeah, the whole like we need 90-minute episodes, or at least throw up a lot more on like CBS All Access or something. That became pretty obvious because like there was no reward challenges really, and no a surviving. Like when I think I first started with Africa and or Australia, I forget. And back then, you would see a lot of like the fishing and the surviving and the cooking and usually a lot of the misery that comes with these people losing tons of weight and starving in the jungle somewhere for a month. Yeah. And like we just didn't get any of that at all. It was just lots of strategy, and I like seeing that too. But I feel like there's a whole other part of the game, maybe the more traditional angle of it that we knew still existed and happened, but just wasn't actually shown to us. So wish we could have got more of that.
The things that has really evolved about Survivor, and that was specifically a major part of this season, is the strategy came into play at Tribal Council. Now, when Survivor first started, it was like everybody went into Tribal Council with a plan, and it was kind of like playing poker in a sense, where you were like, you don't really show your hand, you just kind of have to try to bluff the other person and then pull off moves that way. But over the last couple seasons, and it really was prominent in this season, is how much the strategy really was like, this is what the plan is going into Tribal Council, but who knows what's going to be said or what people are reading or what little nuances they're picking up in someone's inflection that they're like, oh, there's something going on here.
Yeah, totally. Are you a fan of the whole live Tribal Council thing where it gets really hectic and people are out of their seats and whispering and it's just a never-ending loop for like 5 minutes? Do you like that? Do you wish they had like more restrictions, or did you just like the anarchy?
I love the anarchy because I think one of the things about the Survivor early seasons is when there was a plan in place and you just kind of knew what was going to come. It made the end of the show very anticlimactic, like especially when there was a really strong alliance that really wasn't willing to budge. You'd go into Tribal Council and you'd basically be like, after the immunity, you know what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
But now you go into Tribal Council and things can shift. Who won this season? Spoiler alert for anyone that's watching this review and doesn't know who won. Tony in several Tribal Councils was actually calling shots within the Tribal Council, and how that played out to the jury, which having the jury present for pretty much the whole season with the Extinction
Mm-hmm.
Island being a part of it was also a very interesting new aspect to it. I thought was just another level of gameplay that they added of how you're building your resume, how you're presenting yourself throughout the entire game to the people who are going to be casting that vote at the end. Did you like it though?
Yeah, sure, I guess. At times I felt like Denise a little bit though. Like, can we just can you make all your schemes and get on with it? You know, like I get the need to reconvene with your allies and stuff, but yeah, the edge being there and having everyone in the game actually mattering at the end is pretty cool, I guess. I don't think I really like the edge twist itself though. I think I could like it more if fire tokens were also tweaked. You know, like the whole survivor economy has been added, but it just seemed like there was a sense of these will really matter at the end. And then after watching this season, you think about Sandra giving up a immunity idol for 1 token, like Ethan nearly killing himself on the edge for 1 token, like for what, you know? And then Natalie being able to get all those advantages because she had been on the edge the longest and have idols. Meanwhile, people that haven't actually gotten voted out didn't have the ability to just buy idols. Like, I don't know. I just felt like it was a little skewed in terms of like fairness, but Natalie didn't win anyway, so I guess it's okay.
Yeah, it's hard. So his name was Chris Underwood, won after coming back from Extinction a couple seasons back. I think that was season 38, so 2 seasons before. And watching that season, I actually felt very disappointed with him coming in and winning. And I get like, okay, so he had to survive on this island, win his way back in, and then somehow navigate no alliances and coming into this totally new voting block, basically. But it also feels a little bit cheap when so much of the show is following the people who are in the game, and then someone who's been out of the game literally from the first night comes in and makes it down to the final 3. I can understand, I think, how some people feel a little bit frustrated by that. And I think that is an aspect of the game maybe they need to tweak when they send people back in from Extinction, and when they cut that off. I think that can maybe allow someone like that to build their resume a bit. I was actually surprised that Michelle didn't get any votes and Natalie got all of her votes, because I know Michelle was kind of on the bottom the whole time, but often I noticed that people reward that kind of survival tactic where, you know, you're kind of just getting by and just keeping the target off of you in a sense, but people really seem to benefit or really give Natalie credit for how much work she put in on Extinction to get back in the game and shake things up.
Right. Yeah. I'm thinking of like, there's been past champions that, you know, not the most deserving winner, but usually they were part of like the majority alliance and still had a pretty comfortable ride to the end. Think of like Amber and Survivor All Stars or something. And yeah Michelle kind of just finessing the whole time. When she threw her stat out about I was at like, was it 15 of 19 tribal councils or whatever it was, and I was like, that's pretty daunting. And considering she really didn't have an alliance the whole time, um, it's a good resume. It just doesn't quite stack up to Tony. And I mean, we've been talking about this for weeks, so had lots of people, but just the inability of damn near everyone to see Tony as the threat that he was just baffling to us. Like the one person who really saw it out and got a lot of points in my book was Kim. And Kim had a really good effort, and she just got snuffed out and killed off by Tony. But like Sarah was in the finale, right? She was like, I don't know why they see this, and like, she had a really good speech about gender bias in Survivor, which is I think a talking point we've had for a while, and it was good to really have that out in the open. But I think you have to remember that Tony was showing the jury in tribal council, calling out, "Hey, Ben, don't play your idol. We got this." Like he was visibly dictating the shots, whether he was in full command of that alliance or not. So yeah, Tony was pretty much the perceived threat. Like when Natalie's like spilling the tea when she comes back and Sarah's all confused, I was just very surprised. And like, yes, like maybe that's the edit we were getting, like we have much more perspective, I guess, than people actually there in the moment. But I just found it baffling basically the whole time. And you think of people like Ben and especially Nick and even Denise, who had chances to really flip it up and get rid of Tony, and they just tried to ride with Tony as long as they could until they couldn't anymore. And it just became a self-fulfilling prophecy, man. Like he lost some immunities right at the end. There was a chance, and it just didn't happen.
Yeah, it was the moment when Tony was calling those shots, and they panned to Boston Rob, or they cut to Boston Rob, and he goes, "Man, Tony is a don in this game," or he said something along those lines.
The boss,
Tony's
I think he said
this, and I was like, if Boston Rob, if Tony's sitting there making the calling shots, and you have Boston Rob, who probably is the most respected player in the jury at that point since Sandra had gone home, saying that, that he's going to be the winner at the end. So to not be somehow making a play for him is almost like, and I think this also speaks to the game Tony played, where he did make everybody feel like he was their friend, and he really wanted to go to the final, take me to final three. And then Jeremy was like, "What about me?" And like they all kind of were like calling him out. But good on Tony for making them all feel that safe, and like he was actually there for them that way. I was really impressed with Tony. I didn't watch his season, so to see him come in and build a spy nest and be kind of running all these aspects of the game and really snuffing things out, like even how he knew or had an inkling that Natalie had an idol, and Sarah was kind of like calling the shot. No, she doesn't trust me on this. Like, I was just really impressed with how tuned in he was this season, how much work he put in. And he definitely deserved the win.
Yeah, definitely.
I wanted to ask you, who did you come in rooting for this season?
Yeah, I was rooting for the people that I was familiar with from the past. So like Rob, Parvati, and then there's even people that like I watched Yul and Danny's seasons. I looked it up. I was looking up like storylines and things that happened. I remember stuff, but I didn't actually really remember them that much. I didn't actually really know Sandra from her first win. I didn't really remember her, and I didn't see her legend get grown when she won the second time. But yeah, I was just rooting for the older people. I just found like they had more narratives and stuff. And I wasn't familiar with Tyson, but he seems pretty cool too, and everyone seems to like him. So yeah, just rooting for the older people in general. Once like they got snuffed out, I just kind of like went with the flow and took the underdogs and stuff. So I started rooting for Jeremy and Kim and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, it was a little deflating to see like Ethan go real fast, who I also watched, and then Rob and Parv and all that. So I feel like a lot of people felt that. But maybe that's why the Edge was actually good for this season, because you got more of those moments with people that you had a resisting relationship with already.
Yeah, and I think they actually, I agree. I was rooting for Boston Rob, my number one guy. And I really felt like he had a good showing for going out pretty early. But I was definitely also rooting for Wendell, who kind of went out early. He had a really poor showing in the season. But the final episode, on top of being this 3-hour blowout episode with all these twist turns and really exciting gameplay, I was really impressed with what they did after the return challenge, where Jeff was going around and talking to Rob and all the people who are probably not going to be coming back to the show and really getting their perspective on what Survivor has meant to them. Hearing Ethan talk about how some of the money that Survivor had donated actually funded research that found the medication that helped cure his blood cancer is just amazing stuff. And like, I found myself really moved by the way that they edited it, put that together.
Mm-hmm.
When Rob and Amber were talking, I just was like, man, I stand this couple. Like, Survivor really has this way of being just this show that I think encompasses really good reality TV where there's actual like strategy, gameplay. It's not just like that typical Bachelor bullshit, but then there's also the human aspect that I think you get in this sort of show more than you do in those sort of like Bachelor shows where the sob story is almost like you have to have one to get by. Do you find yourself connecting with that aspect of the show as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think especially in this case, because we already had a relationship with a lot of those characters, you really felt felt their message, and it did land. I was just thinking, like, how many of these this big cast, this stacked all-star cast of winners, how many of them do you think have the potential to actually come back? Like, there's a lot we can write off, right? I think Sandra's done, Rob's done, Amber's done, Parv's done. Seems
Sandra
like Tyson
was done this season.
Yeah, Tyson's probably done. Jeremy, Ethan for sure. Yule probably. Like a lot of legends. Danny, they're probably all gone, never come back. So who do you think has the potential to actually return to this show? I mean, like, a lot of recent winners were here, so like, they're probably who you'd pick. But
yeah, I think the 3 or 4 that I think are definitely we're going to be seeing again are Wendell, Ben, Nick, and Michelle, I would say. And Natalie, I think if she wants to continue doing this, I mean, she's really into CrossFit, so she's definitely going to be in the shape to be competitive, or at least continue to be in the mix. But I wonder if her making it down to these final 3 and being hasn't been on the show for 6 years. She's season 29, so 5.5, 6 years. They might say that they want to start bringing in some new blood. But yeah, those seem like the 3. Did you like Adam? Because Adam won season 33, so he's fairly recent, but I just could not connect with him. I found him actually quite annoying a lot of the season, so I kind of hope he doesn't come back, but he's up there too, I think.
Yeah, he's definitely up there, just, given age. It's funny, Wendell's actually a lot older than I thought. He's like in his mid-30s, but Adam's only in his late 20s. Yeah, Adam's someone who his just strategy, his angles seem to not really work from the jump. And again, we're just trusting the edit we get, but he, for someone who was supposed to be more tactical and like a Survivor savant from his winning season, so I've been told, that didn't really come across this time. And like the whole like feuding with Ben in general was just like at the source of annoying feuds. Like, I didn't care about his feud with Adam, nor did I care about his feud with Jeremy. But yeah, Adam, if he was to get back to that more basic stuff, I feel like he kind of represents like a modern, right now, Survivor fan, Survivor champ. So yeah, I'd be open to it, I guess, but didn't really care for him this time.
Yeah. I think Sarah is another person that we could see come back. She also made it to final 3, or final 4, I guess it is. And she's season 34, so she's fairly new too. And I think she'll probably want to establish herself separate from Tony after seeing the way that this season was edited. So, and she had a really strong moment, like you talked about in one of the last tribals, talking about the gender bias on the show. And I think Jeff handled that pretty well, giving her the Lucina send off.
Yes.
So some really good moments. I could see them coming back. Do you expect yourself to be tuned into Survivor more moving forward?
Yeah, I think so. I've come to appreciate it as like real life, like fantasy sports, and I really like that. So yeah, I think it's just really fun, and it's definitely the most engaging reality TV I've ever seen. And like you said, it's not just the trashy turn your brain off stuff you can really connect with. And especially if they can somehow give us the other traditional elements of, I just want to see these people surviving. I want to see someone like cut themselves with their flint and steel. I want to see all that bullshit too. So if we can get that, yeah, I'll be totally in. And I'm just curious, like Jeff says it at the end of the finale, they're committed to season 41 in this fall. They're sticking to their schedule. They were supposed to shoot this season, I believe in March, and they right before they were starting to go, everything started shutting down. So of course it hasn't happened. That would have been in Fiji, which is like their home base at this point. But now there's some talk about season 41 maybe being in the States. I see Survivor Wild West being thrown out there. uh, I'm down with that in general, just because it seems to be a switch up. It was cool the early days too, when there were like distinct locales, right?
Yeah.
Before the show started settling in and just being somewhere in the Pacific Islands.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I think that would be a great decision, and just giving something different. Um, I I don't think Survivor has really made a misstep, and even in terms of the things I don't think worked as well, like the fire tokens or the extinction, it all adds an interesting element. So I think whatever they add would just add another factor to that gameplay. Just as we wrap up, I want to just throw it out there. So Sandra and Rob definitely up there on the Survivor Mount Rushmore. Probably got to have Tony now. Do
Mm-hmm.
you have anybody that you would definitely be up there for four?
Yeah, I mean, what's that? Tony, Sandra, two-time champs, the only two, obvious. Rob, a
Rob,
winner and a runner-up,
yeah, de
and has
facto
just
two-time champ.
right general status about him. I've seen some people saying that Rob's good but overrated, which I think is kind of an interesting case if you want to make it. Anyway, so not, well, at this point, it's just people I haven't totally watched. Like people really have Tyson up there. Um,
Yeah,
and
Tyson,
I can't really
Parvati.
speak to a lot of the goat talk because I haven't seen enough of the show in the
Yeah,
past decade.
yeah. I guess maybe if you're going just straight Mount Rushmore theory, maybe you'd have Richard Hatch up there, only because
Yep.
he was the season one winner and kind of probably one of the most famous winners that they've ever had. Just that the
Mm-hmm.
show was a
Oh yeah, like
such a hit.
120 million people watched that finale of the first season. Like
Yeah,
insane.
insane, something like that. But I think Natalie might have a case too, coming in being a runner up on Winners at War. After that, I mean, there's some people in the discussion. So
Sure.
if you are a Survivor fan, you're watching this, tell us who would be on your Mount Rushmore. I want to know what the right answer is. So
I actually like to think about too, like who are the best non-winners? Like they did Survivor
mm,
Second Chance a few years back with people that didn't win but played before. And I think of people like Russell Hantz, was it? Who's
mm,
very unpopular but noted like tactician, and people
Rupert.
Coach, and yep, Rupert, really
Yep.
popular. Siri, right? Like there's a lot of good ones too. So it's a fun thing to talk about too, because it's kind of like sports, right? Like you
Oh
can
yeah,
make the case for a bunch of different people once you get past like the ring talk. So it's a lot of fun, and that's why the show just endures, because people just they're interested in it.
definitely, definitely. All right, Dave. Jumping into music, let's start with an up and coming artist that we've been talking. I feel like about a decent amount recently, as we've been talking about XXL Freshman. The list obviously coming soon. Sheff G dropping his second, I guess, album project, One and Only, follow up to last year's The Unlucky Lucky Kid. He uses the two C's too, like thick boy. So I appreciate that.
Yeah,
Sheff
not gang
G.
affiliated or anything with that spelling. Nothing to do with that.
No, not at all. I appreciate this album from first minute I saw it because it was 25 minutes and I appreciate the quick listen. I also appreciated it because I felt like there was actually some decent songs in here, and I was left pretty impressed with Sheff G. He's obviously related to the Brooklyn drill scene. But this felt like a more like stripped down version of that, and he was trying to branch out with some other sounds on this a little bit more. And I was pretty impressed with One and Only. How were you feeling after listening to it?
Yeah, I think that's the main takeaway. What you said, that Chef G has moved past the traditional expectation that we have for the sound of Brooklyn drill, in itself a relatively new sound. You'll notice that Axel Beats and 808 Mellow are not here. The super producers out of the UK who have basically produced all the major hits out of Brooklyn for this scene thus far, including Chef G's breakout No Suburban. But they're not here. We have a producer who I'm not familiar with named Great John, who's from the New York area, and we don't have those church bells and those
Mm-hmm.
horror movie piano keys that we expect from the traditional sound. It's much more mellower and almost just kind of simpler production. And that kind of growth in the sound reminded me a lot of when we talked about Heady One and how he was evolving past the traditional UK drill that he had become famous for. So that kind of growth is really cool to me, and is kind of setting Sheff G apart in his his borough, in his scene right now. I think, 22Gs, we talked about growth and development. 22Gs and Sheff G have major beef due to gang ties and whatnot, but obviously one of them made Suburban, then another made No Suburban. 22Gs made Suburban Part 2, and then Sheff G recently released No Suburban Part 2, which is on this project. And those are basically like kind of diss songs at each other. I like both artists, but let's hope nothing comes out of that. I will say, though, that in No Suburban Part 2, Sheff G has kind of an instant quotable. Heard that boy a snitch, fish him out, which is just an obvious 6ix9ine diss. You love to see it. But yeah, other than that, it's like Sheff G, who made an impression on Lil TJ's very bad State of Emergency mixtape, which we talked about last week. He made an impression, though, just because I think he has a lot of presence whenever he talks. Like, he has that kind of deep voice, but it's not as gravelly as Pop Smoke, right? Like it kind of has like that. You can mistake him for being from London, which happened when he first blew up, but I think he's kind of just a rapper's rapper. It's really cool. So yeah, I thought it was good. There's a lot of songs I like.
Yeah, I thought there was a lot to like on here. A couple of songs that really stood out to me, mostly for subverting my expectations, I think. Once I'm Gone, the way that he kind of has like the flute going through it reminded me a little bit of an artist that we're not going to talk about today, Future, and who I think has incorporated flutes quite a bit into his work in the past, and pretty famously. I thought No Suburban Part 2, which I'm fairly certain is on our Best of the Year
It is
podcast favorites already. Check that out, Nowstalgia Best of 2020 on Spotify. I thought that was probably the best track off this album. Really impressive showing. But then Tonight 2 also I thought was great, and Wait on Me also stood out to me. So, I mean, just even jumping around, you can find something on here. And even the beginning, there was some good stuff. So it seems like pretty quality, and I definitely appreciate that he's not just staying in his lane, that he's willing to branch out, but doing it seems like pretty tastefully. What song stood out to you?
Yeah, I also really liked Second Intro, which is the first track, as well as Moody, the second song. Moody reminded me a lot of We Getting Money, which was the big track off the Unlucky Lucky Kid last year. And, those kind of songs, he just has that like Brooklyn attitude, and he's talked about his reverence for Biggie, which you love to see from someone who's obviously was not a coherent thought when Biggie actually died. I think Sheff G is just 21 years old. So it's really cool to hear that. And while I don't think he has like to this point, like the viralness that 5EO likes to ride for. And he doesn't seem to have the snarl that 22Gs has. He still has a lot of presence on the mic. And I really like him. I think he's probably the leader in the clubhouse in terms of who's making the best music right now out of these guys, in the wake of Pop Smoke's passing, of course. So it's just really cool. I mean, we talked about New York rappers like 5 times in quarantine because they're all just kind of popping up and doing stuff, and like it's just such a cool contrast to hear little TJ's like whiny ass, and then you have Sheff G who sounds like he gargles Drainal. Like there's so much there. So yeah, I like this, and I feel like the New Yorkers, man, they've been hitting us. I guess next we need Smooth L drop something, I guess. But everyone who's mattered has really dropped in the past 6 weeks. It's been pretty fun.
Dave, wanted to give you a second because we were talking after the pod to just correct maybe a name or two that we didn't mention last week when talking about who's the king of New York right now, and this seems like the best time to do it. So just gonna give you the floor real quick.
Oh yeah, we forgot to mention Cardi B.
Yeah, we really dropped the ball on that one. So anyone that listened in was just like, these guys are idiots. Yeah, we got most of them, but Cardi somehow.
I noticed it on our own. after
And
the fact. It's not like
and
someone had to comment.
Cardi she probably I mean, I don't know if she lives in the Bronx still, but she's from very close to me. I mean, I could get to the Bronx in 20 minutes if I wanted to right now. So,
Yep.
uh, big miss by us there. But Sheff G, great showing on One and Only. Check that out. Polo G, the GOAT, his newest project album. This is, I guess, truly an album. 47 minutes long, 16 tracks. I want to let you kind of lead the way with Polo G, because I I had very mixed feelings about this album. At points, I was really like, "Oh, this is very solid, very like heartfelt, soulful music." And then at points, I was like, "That is this the same track? Am I skipping around?" Felt very samey to me at times. It went out with a bang though, and we'll talk about that, I think. But how are you feeling about the GOAT from Polo G?
Yeah. I will agree that with 16 tracks, we could have cut a few of these. Not all of them reach the same highs as I think the best songs on the track listing do. That being said, I really love this. Polo G is someone I've thought highly of for some time. And namely, I think he's just like, he's the best rapper right now out of Chicago. He's making the best music right now. And he's really cool because he's a product of the original drill scene out of Chicago. You know, G Herbo, Chief Keef, and Lil Durk are kind of the forefathers of that. And they're all making music still. I think G Herbo and Durk in particular are probably making the best music they've ever made. G Herbo's PTSD album was easily his best. Wish we had reviewed that. We had let that pass. We had a busy week. And Durk, too, who just dropped Just Cause Y'all Waited 2, was also really good. And that kind of music is special for just kind of highlighting the pain that these artists have gone through in their lives, living in tough circumstances in and around Chicago. And people found that relatable across the globe, hence why that kind of lyricism has since moved to Brooklyn and the UK. In Polo G's case, I think he has just a knack for making like really sticky songs that also have really meaningful lyrics. Like, and if you can look at the reception to this project, I think it's really, really positive. And, you know, the whole like highlighting your pain sound is pretty in vogue. Like we get that from a lot of the Southern guys now too. Think of NBA Youngboy, who's absolutely huge superstar. He's doing the same thing, but he kind of has more of that like singy Southern drawl to him. In Polo G's case, he almost has like this smooth way of delivering his music. Like he almost has, like, he's almost like softly spoken, yet there is a lot of punch behind what he's saying. So in terms of just like highlighting the struggle music, I think this is really top tier shit. And like the highs are just really high to me. So I did really like it.
Yeah, I think there's no denying that he's a great lyricist and his verses are very strong. I think that was the thing I found myself. I actually listened to this when I was going for a run. I found myself kind of getting lost in the lyrics and kind of actually like feeling like I was really understanding the picture he was trying to paint with a lot of things. And it caught me, I think, because a lot of times, especially when I'm like working out listening to music, I kind of just really fall into the beat and the things going on around.
Of course.
But the fact he was pulling me in with his verses, I think, was kind of what I found very special about this album. But then as I zoomed out and was kind of feeling the music, I did find myself feeling like the tracks all kind of were just piano based, and I didn't feel that much variance in them. I think that's kind of where I was a little bit like, maybe this could have been cooked a little bit better, or like you said, maybe just trimmed a bit to make a more concise project. But definitely I was impressed with his lyricism. Like you said, it's interesting because when you were talking about the best music coming out of Chicago, are you talking about only for this scene, or are you just seeing like in general he's the best artist out of Chicago right now?
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, we talk about Chicago hip hop a lot, right? Because on one hand, it has a wealth of influential OGs, right? Kanye, Common, Lupe, right? And then it also is the scene of both music from the streets, drill and the evolution of that, and then also kind of like where jazz rap is based out of right now in terms of Chance and Saba and No Name and people that are not from Chicago but are pretty close from Chicago, like Smino. Like there's a lot going on in Chicago hip hop. And Polo G, I think, once Chance took a step back last year, I think the lane was open for him. And I mean, you can certainly quibble, especially with the jazz rap people. In terms of people that are like popular and mainstream, though, I think it's definitely Polo G.
Wow. I mean, it's a really high compliment for him. So tell me, what songs off this album, what were like the highs for you that you said were really high?
Yeah. I mean, I really like 21. He has, I think, a really quotable line where he's like, "Can't relapse off these drugs, man. R.I.P. to Juice. Tweaking off these perks. I popped my last one with you." Mm-hmm. Hearing him actually talk about how his friend and fellow Chicagoan who died of ODing, hearing him actually like learn from that, I think means a lot. And because Polo G is so popular with the kids like Juice WRLD, I really hope that's a message that lasts. But I think what blew me away in terms of lines was actually on "I Know" in the second verse, where he's kind of going through this whole story about talking about a kid, and it could be autobiographical, I don't know, but he says he kind of has this like, he like pitches the delivery a little bit and like almost sings it a bit, but he's like, "By his auntie, he was molested as a baby boy, messed up his head, it even changed the way he plays with toys." And like I ran that back a few times. I was like, fuck, man, that shit's hitting. And then I think the obvious, I mean, Juice WRLD's feature on Flex was really strong as well. That was great to hear. Heartless, I really like. That's an older song from last year, but I think that song's awesome. And then, I mean, the last track, "Wishing for a Hero," BJ the Chicago Kid, that's sampling Bruce Hornsby's "The Way It Is," made famous by Tupac in Changes. And he's not only just doing that sample, he's doing Tupac's Changes flow. And like Tupac, he's talking about some heavy shit in terms of how Malcolm X and Martin Luther King inspire him, and talking about like race relations and police relations of right now. Like I was just blown away, and like honestly like kind of made me tear up a little bit when I listened to it a second time. Yeah, even though a lot of that struggle I really obviously can't really relate to. So I think his highs are just really fucking high. And of course, let's not forget "Go Stupid" with "Son of Her Vegas" and Emily Chapa. That's a TikTok song right now too. So he's kind of just got the generic banger if you want it.
Yeah. "Go Stupid" was the song I probably most associate him with, because it is so in the TikTok I don't know, culture right now. Mm-hmm. But "Wishing for a Hero," that was what I would mention in terms of like going out with a bang, because like I said, I found myself especially near the end, feeling like a bit of it was redundant, and then that comes on, and like noticing that he was using Roger Hornsby's "The Way It Is" and copying the flow, I just was like, this is fucking crazy. Like I something that's totally unexpected, totally shifted the mood at the end. I felt like it kind of ended the album on this really high note, and it made me want to go back and listen to some of the other songs. I thought that was an excellent choice and an impressive showing by him as well. So Polo G, I mean, I think you said he's one of the ones that is freshman bound for sure, right?
Oh, definitely. That's a lock. Yep.
So with that, we should be getting that fairly soon, a couple weeks.
If it's the June cover, we might get it this week or next. So we'll know soon.
We'll be talking about it when it drops. I'm sure we'll be talking about Polo G. So we went from New York to Chicago. Now we're going down south to North Carolina to check in with part 2 of Moses Sumney's "Gray," which we talked about back in March, I believe, when it came out.
February, actually.
February, yeah. And at the time we talked about it, I think our main takeaway was that "Gray Part 1" really showcases Sumney's amazing vocal performances, and seems like a bit of a step out of aromanticism, his critically acclaimed first album. In terms of, I think, direction and ambition, it seems like he was trying to go off and kind of write songs that were touching on more than just interpersonal relationship, which was the main part of aromanticism and kind of the human experiences around those. After listening to part 2, did you have any new takeaways from this? Was there any songs or anything that really made you think differently of "Gray Part 1" now that you've heard the second part of the album?
I'll be honest, no. No, I don't think my opinion really changed, mainly because I already was holding Moses Sumney's talent and the Gray uh, prospect in already high esteem, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So it's just kind of more confirmation of what we expect. As you said, just incredible vocal performance, but also just kind of giving you unexpected music more often than not, whether it's like modulating his voice, crushing this wild falsetto, whatever he might be doing, he does kind of change it up frequently, despite the fact that it always feels in the vibe of his album. And because his vibe is so unique, uh, it's hard not to just kind of be in wow. He's an artist that I have a hard time like describing and talking about because he does not a lot of like reference points. But yeah, I guess like the themes of like was it mortality and identity. Thematically, it's similar to part one, and I don't know if any songs like blew me away or anything, but it's just kind of the whole prospect. Like there was that narration on and so what's the song called? Towards the back end.
And so I come to isolation.
Yeah, that sounded really cool. And in the beginning, the first track of this part, two dogs. I really liked that. Like there's like a second voice in the background of the production that kind of really added to it. And on bystanders, it really kind of builds up. And there's definitely really cool moments. But overall, Moses Sumney, man, he's just kind of hard to pin down, and that's the case once again. So 20 songs now for this Gray album. 20 songs, about an hour. I don't know if anything is like easy to like take away from the album. It's kind of just like a vibe you just kind of float through, but yeah, it's really good.
Yeah, that the voice you're talking about, I think they have a couple of spoken word parts. Is Tai? My handwriting is terrible. I think it's Tai Salasis, and she's this Nigerian Ghanaian author, and a lot of what she was talking about was like the multiplicity of self and how there's like the parts of ourselves that we show people, the parts of ourselves that we feel like aren't things we want to show people, and how you kind of wrestle with being this whole person, but feeling like you can only show parts of yourself. And I really feel like that encompasses and kind of is a good thesis statement for this album, right? Because it feels, in the identity or the identity of the album as this expansion of ideas and of direction for Moses to try some things while keeping his own sound and this uniqueness. I think he really took some chances and had some really cool production on here. I think he had some collaborators that fit really well for what he was going for, like James Blake, Thundercat, Onitrix or
Onitrix Point Never, right?
Yeah, whatever. But they are kind of these unique song or artists in their own right, and to have them kind of come in and help him flesh out these ideas while keeping this like auteurmanship about it. The music videos he has are very interesting and unique, to say the least. He's just a very singular person, and I think the fact that we can't pin down a good way to describe him actually is probably the best way to describe him, that there really is no other artist like Moses Sumney right now, and that's what makes him so exciting. So I'm actually really excited to talk next week about Perfume Genius, whose newest album is getting kind of compared similarly to this album in terms of just like the inability to like define it and kind of using that duplicity of self. So I think we'll be kind of bringing Gray into the discussion next week when we get to Perfume Genius. You mentioned a couple of songs. I think the only one I really wanted to point out that you didn't mention was Me in 20 Years. The transition from Bystanders to Me in 20 Years is just so beautiful to me. And those two songs paired together were the highlight of me for the second half of the album. But really the whole thing, you can find something in each song that I think is just unique and wonderful. So it's worth a listen. If you're not a Moses Sumney fan, we highly recommend him. And Dave, someone I know that you recommend highly, Charli XCX. When Charli XCX first popped up, there was no way I thought I would still be like tuned into her and actually like increasingly more impressed with her as an artist 10 years later, you know, because what I Don't Care was like her breakout hit. And
Yep, with
I
Icona
mean,
Pop and then Boom Clap and the fancy feature with Iggy. Those are like the three, I think,
yeah.
big ones that were on the radio early on.
And she kind of just felt like this artist who was like kind of the moment, very like poppy and could easily fade away quickly. And she's just really steered into this lane of like futuristic dream pop, I guess might be the way to
Mm-hmm.
describe it, where
Yep.
um she just is more and more fascinating to me with each album. You know, last year's Charli received a lot of acclaim, got really good reviews, and it felt like she was kind of going away from this almost like obscure dream poppiness more into like some mainstream poppiness with it. And you know, obviously having Haim and Christina and the Queens on that album really helped. But then she comes
Mm-hmm.
back with How I'm Feeling Now, which is very much, the title is very accurate. It's been written in the last couple of weeks since this isolation and this, you know, stay at home order has been into effect, except for one song written and produced and constructed the last couple of weeks. Is this an album, Dave, that continues that Charli XCX fantasticness?
Yeah, for sure. The quarantine album, something that meant nothing to all of us just a few months ago. Of course, Charli XCX released a really good one of these things because she's one of the few artists in mainstream pop music that kind of has the ability to adapt and change like that. Um, you know, her sensibilities in terms of like future pop and alternative pop never I think went away when she was, you know, bringing more people into the fold last year with Charli. But this opportunity to just, as you said, create a bunch of new songs from scratch, mix all this stuff right now. Uh, it just kind of plays into her hand, like the DIY-ness of it all. So I was just kind of, you know, I didn't really know what to expect, right? Like Charli last year has a lot of like um, kind of obvious songs that they're familiar, right? Like Blame It On Your Love with Lizzo. That, you know what that song is. Then something like Gone is really engaging and easy to get into. And that was my favorite song last year. But then we have kind of like a heel turn, I guess, with How I'm Feeling Now, because this is really wild synths and just kind of out there production the whole time. It's really wacky stuff. And obviously very electronic, as a lot of her stuff is. And it definitely reflects the time. And I think it and the production really fits the mood she's carrying on with the lyrics. So yeah, I liked it a lot. It was uh pretty nuts, man.
Yeah, I was blown away by this album. I think for two reasons. One, it does feel like it captures the moment really well, even if I don't know if the sentiments of it are, and I guess the message of it is as widely encompassing of most people's experience in isolation and this, you know, quarantine, because a lot of it is about like falling in love with the person you're with, and you know, not as many people are there for that. But I think there's so many songs on here that are just so catchy and so unique sounding that it's hard to not just kind of leave this album wanting to go back to like each song and re-listen and catch something different. Like
Yep.
Claws, I think, is the popular highlight off of this. Obviously produced by your guy from 100 Gex, Dylan Brady.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds like a 100 Gex song, honestly.
Yep.
But I thought songs like Detonate, I Finally Understand, C2O were
Mm-hmm.
really, really catchy, really had moments that just felt so high. And this is really like next level pop, right? So you have those kind of people like those artists like Taylor Swift, who are very much in that pop sphere. Um, and Ariana Grande exist just kind of in that moment and aren't really pushing the idea forward. And this just feels like Charli, even in things that she just kind of conceptualizes quickly and makes around a time of our lives that's hopefully fleeting and not going to be too much longer, but we all should be prepared for it to be somewhat longer. The fact that she can make something this quality of it just speaks to her level of artistry, and it's really impressive. And I just left being like, the fact that she made this so quickly and it's this good is just great. So I was blown away. What songs stood out to you from this?
Yeah, so Dylan Brady's on this a lot. I actually think the most Gexy of all these songs would be Anthems. Anthems right at the end. That, that's just kind of wild electronic production, really out there, not like familiar sounding, and that's exactly what 100X does. So that's where that brought me. C 2.0 is interesting because that's actually a remix, a rework of Click, Charli's song from last year's album. And that's something she's done before, kind of flip old songs and old concepts. It's pretty cool to follow that along.
Yep.
I think Forever kind of stood out. That's probably the most traditional of all the songs, but still kind of has that Charli flair. But my favorite song is I Finally Understand, which was the third single, just because that has the just really catchy drum line, and it's got a much faster pitch than most of the album. And also the chorus is just really, really catchy. So I think Charli fans, if are really happy with this, of course, but there's a lot of just wild stuff on here as one comes to expect from Charli the past few years. So I think if you're open to this and if you liked Billie Eilish being a little out there last year, you're probably also going to like Charli XCX being even more out there. So the fact that this is becoming more viable out in the open for pop music is kind of why I've always been a big fan of hers, because she's just kind of pushing those boundaries and doing that once again with this, an album that she workshopped in real time with lots of her fans, with live streams and private Zooms and stuff. It's just kind of something that only really she could have delivered, so it's really cool.
Yeah, she's a very singular artist, and I think that seems to be the theme of what we appreciate, is just when artists are doing their own thing and things that seem so unique to them, to kind of sum up Moses and Charli today. Yeah, great album. Look, we'll be adding probably one or two songs from those two that we just talked about onto our Nowstalgia Best 2020, so follow that. Dave, let's move on to, I guess, a movie, TV, with The Last Dance, ESPN's 10-part docu-series about Michael Jordan's final season with the Chicago Bulls, the 1998 championship for the Bulls. And
spoilers.
Yeah, sorry if you aren't familiar with Michael Jordan's career by now. I'm sorry I just ruined it all for you. It was a 6-1, so there's a lot that you missed. We talked about the first two episodes back when they aired 5 weeks ago. Now that the series is wrapped up, what are your lasting impressions of The Last Dance?
Yeah, the reservation I think people had going in that it would be a Jordan hagiography, basically out of necessity, because Jordan was involved in the production creation of this doc and had to sign off on the usage of all that never before seen to the public footage of the 1998 season. Knowing all that going in, that has since been confirmed. Ultimately, this was made to bolster the Jordan myth and whatnot. And I don't know if anything really revealed in The Last Dance is super new to the discourse. If anything, I think this doc is good for being entertaining and really highlighting and showing you the big famous moments of Jordan's run. But if you already kind of knew that stuff, you probably aren't going to get anything super new out of this. And it's kind of funny. Right at the end of episode 10, part 10, when Jordan's talking about how he actually wanted to go back to Chicago in 99 and try for his 7th ring. And he obviously wasn't given that chance, and he retired. Phil leaves, Pippen's traded, everyone else, you know the drill. But that was actually a new development that people didn't really knew Jordan felt that way. He never really commented on that. And that's there right at the end. Then the doc ends. So it's like the one thing that was actually kind of new to everyone, not just people that were maybe younger and didn't experience all this, like me. That was just kind of thrown in there at the end, So it's not as this is not an OJ Made in America, right? This is more just like, here's the hits, and you get some cool footage. I don't know if anything's super cutting. Like we could have went deeper into the gambling stuff. It turns out he did have a wife. You did see his kids right at the end. Like there's stuff missing, obviously, but it was just entertaining the whole time. And there's some really good moments and pieces in it. So I'm not super critical, but you have to just kind of understand how it was made.
Yeah, I think my lasting impression of it is that the way that ESPN kind of moved this around so that it did fill these Sundays during this time of quarantine, worked out so perfectly to make this just a phenomena. And I wonder, I think it would have been successful regardless, but I wonder if it would have had the level of success and the discourse around it. If
their highest rated doc.
I think the memeability of it, and the trick that I'd never seen a documentary of handing the iPad and having Jordan's reaction recorded live, like seeing these clips of people telling these stories, like Jerry Reinsdorf saying why they couldn't bring everybody back, or why they had to do the rebuild, all that sort of stuff was just so good, and it made it so fascinating. And all those memes about Jordan's face, like him laughing at one of the clips, just is so good. And I really think that that's probably the thing I'll have a lasting memory of. I agree with your criticisms for sure. I think it's funny because like they talk about Rodman going out and being with Carmen Electra or all these other women as he was out, or some of the other players and they're like drinking or gambling or things like that. And then Jordan just conspicuously is like, no, he didn't. It's not mentioned if he was or was not partaking in a lot of these things, but you hear little snippets of it, like him saying before he came to practice he had like 4 beers and was, a shot, was playing piano and things like that, so he's coming a little bit torqued up to practice. Or hearing the pizza poison story or the flu game, I was like, we sure it was the pizza? We sure? Like,
I would just like to ask, how the fuck did they know they were making a pizza for Michael Jordan?
Yeah.
This is the 98th season where he has all this security and is treated, like he was Michael Jackson. He can't go out anywhere, right? This was not back in the day, right? This is, they know their drill. Jordan's got all the security people. His trainer knows what's up. How the fuck did they know they were making Jordan's pizza to then poison it or whatever? How the hell did they know that? Doesn't make any sense. You don't be like, hey, I got a pizza for 5-time champion, most famous athlete in the world, Michael Jordan. Can you make it fast? Like, you're joking.
I mean, even if you were ordering the pizza, unless you're a complete imbecile, you have to assume that they know where the opposing team is staying, hotel-wise. So you say like, we'll pick it up, or you can deliver it like outside in the lobby or something like that. So at least not like,
obviously they didn't. It's not a pizza for Mike,
right?
He has all these people with him, like
just. And the fact he's like, I ate the whole thing by myself at like 2 a.m. I was like, this is just total bullshit. But he got him and his crew got the story straight going in.
Yeah,
I do
everyone was on message.
I think the other part of it is, it felt a little bit unfair to like expose some of the things that other people were going through. They kind of talked about Dennis Rodman and some of his hardships, some of Scotty's personal stuff. Even Kerr got some moments in terms of things that he went through in his life. And Michael, they talked about him losing his dad, and then they talked about him and his, head of security, Let there, and how he kind of became a father figure and how that affected Michael emotionally. But really, it felt like they kind of stayed away from a lot of things in his personal life. And if anything, I was kind of struck by how he felt like he needed to have his parents around so much, and I'm kind of left struck with like wanting to understand that more, like why this guy who seems like he's so able to handle himself so well in so many ways felt like he needed that parenting around him constantly.
But then in turn, being a parent himself didn't seem to matter that much.
Right.
It's kind of funny.
He wasn't interested in playing that role, it seems like, to his sons as much as he wanted to be parented and praised.
Yeah.
So
Well,
very interesting.
It's just kind of funny too, because like so like the Steve Kerr thing went about his dad being murdered, and like I knew that, but I think that was a great thing to have there, because I don't think a lot of people knew that at all about Steve Kerr, even though he's obviously still in the consciousness as the coach of the Warriors, and that was really cool. But like everyone's kind of speaking with bated breath, right? It's like when you talk to like Horace Grant or you talk to Kerr, and it's like, yeah, sometimes like, you know, Michael get on our nerves, and like that's code for, if he said this, if you asked him that 20 years ago, he's like, yeah, Michael fucking pissed us off. Like we fucking hated him a lot of the time. Like, like it's almost like we lost the punch of terms of like how much he was a dick. Yet you do have that great moment when he's asked about that, and he kind of tears up about like his ethos as an athlete and how he strives to win and stuff. That was a great moment.
You don't want to play that way? Don't play that way.
Break.
So good. Actually, I felt like that moment was the highlight of the whole thing for me. I've watched that moment, those 2 minutes back, like 3 or 4 times. It was really well done.
Yeah. But like the gambling was undercooked. It's like I don't have a gambling problem. I have a competition problem, is how he said, or I have a winning problem, whatever it was.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, that sounds exactly like what a gambling addict would say. I wish he would have owned it a little bit more, but
well, yeah, he goes on to say like, yeah, I haven't like lost my house or anything yet, and it's like, well, it's just because you haven't like lost things doesn't mean you don't have a gambling addiction. Like it's not really how it works. But
yeah, it's like we kind of like skirt it past, and next thing you know, it's the media. They're always trying to get Jordan with his gambling stuff. It's like, well, you know, they're just following up on the things Jordan actually does. So you know, you know, these sketch balls that he has no reason to be in contact with, that he owes money to. You know, whatever. Yeah. It's the media's fault. So we kind of rushed past that, in my opinion. But yeah, it highlights all the major moments, all the shots and stuff. And you know, I wish it could have. I kind of would have liked it to almost like focus on like the aftermath a little bit more. Like Jordan retires, Rodman's about to be out of the league. You know, Scottie has that big deal. Everyone else gets traded. Like I thought it kind of ended abruptly, but apparently Jason Hare and friends were cutting this up the last 2 parts in these past 5 weeks, so it was not actually like feature locked when ESPN moved this release date up. So yeah, in that sense, it can't be too critical. They did a really good job still.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to ask just 2, like maybe 3 final questions. First, how did you feel like Scottie Pippen came out of this? I've seen people feeling mixed ways about how Scottie was portrayed.
No, I didn't have an issue with it. I mean, comes from a really strong, really tough background, and he shoots himself in the foot by signing a below market deal early because he needed security now because he had a poor family to support. You know, I thought that all went well, and I mean, yeah, he takes it on the chin when he doesn't come back in the game, but like they also like win 50 something games when Michael's playing baseball. Like, yeah. So like I don't know what's the criticism from. Like I don't know.
They make it to the Eastern Conference Finals. I think where the criticism, some people are saying he doesn't come out looking that great in the doc, and some people are saying he does come out looking great. Is I think people feel like he was kind of portrayed as this like as not as much of a winner, you know, as like he does sit out that final play because he's not getting the shot, and he does have the migraines in that one game and doesn't play through it and those sort of things. But then I actually feel like the last episode really highlights what made Scottie such a great number 2 and really just like such a great player in general was just his presence on the floor in a game where his back pretty much was shot. Makes such a difference to allowing the rest of the team to function the way it's supposed to. And, you know, even like a Scottie Pippen at like 50-40% is better than most players in the league, or at least more dangerous in the opponent's eyes. So I think in that sense, he does come out looking pretty good, although there are some low moments for him for sure.
Right.
So my second question was going to be, what is like the moment other than maybe that Michael crying moment that you're going to remember most from this doc?
I like that. I like the stuff with the Pistons where he's like, I don't really care what Isaiah has to say. I don't fucking trust him or fucking hate that guy. However exactly he phrased it.
Yeah,
that was really good.
I thought that Piston stuff was great, and mostly just how they kind of showed him like getting over the hump. You know, how he came in and he was good right away, but they weren't winning championships right away, and he kind of like kept losing to the Pistons over and over, and to the Celtics in the beginning, and then him finally like overcoming is a moment. And then also I think the moment where they showed him crying on the floor after he won the championship on Father's Day. I think it was his third one. That moment really like struck me for sure. And last, is there a documentary around a player or around a season like this, or a team that you would want to see made?
Can't think of anything off the top of my head. I think the key with this is that a lot of time has passed. There was unseen footage. It's just a general cult of personality and fame. You know, it's not as applicable as you might think. So, yeah, I'm not sure. Like what especially like 10 hours of material. I'm not sure what else would warrant this.
Yeah. I think the only thing that really comes to mind is the Patriots from the last 20 years, and that's going to be tough, you know, because I think it's too close to it right now. But I think in 10, 15 years, Belichick's retired, Brady might still be playing. They can maybe look into what was going on, because I mean, not only is there the championships and the sustained level of success, but there's all the drama, players getting cut early, Aaron Hernandez, cheating scandal after cheating scandal. So there's just a lot to really go into there. So
yeah, I think that's a good one.
That's the main one. I couldn't really think of another one that fit. I mean, I think looking at Wayne Gretzky more in depth would be good, because just his numbers are so absurd. And like, I mean, just I've been hearing a lot of Gretzky stats recently, and I feel like there's a good doc to be made about him, but I've never really seen one hyped about him that's really good. So maybe that would be one. I don't know. But The Last Dance, it's a good way to kill five Sundays, and looks like ESPN has some other good documentaries coming for 30 for 30 this summer. So I'm looking forward to the Mark McGuire Sosa one for sure. And maybe we'll be talking about some of those as they come. But Dave, let's move on now, because we have to. If you didn't understand what I was saying we're talking about Josh Trank's newest film, Capone, released this past Tuesday or Wednesday on demand. And Tom Hardy stars as Fonzo. Don't call him Al. It's Fonzo. Alphonse Capone, famous mobster. Everybody knows who he is. But in the last year of his life, after he was released from penitentiary, his brain is rotting because of long-term syphilis, which is the effects have been slowed by penicillin treatment, but obviously cannot be cured at this point. So his mind is deteriorating, body's deteriorating. Dave, is this a good movie?
Nah.
Okay. So since it's not a good movie, is this at least an interesting movie to you?
I have a lot of meta interest in it. I think there's a lot of stuff going on with that, right? Mm-hmm. Surface level, you have Tom Hardy giving a performance that is leaning away from the natural leading man charisma that he has, as Hardy is wont to do. He might not be wearing a mask in the literal sense this time, but he still is hard to understand under a thick face of makeup and not attractive like he is in his normal life. So yeah, it's like a classic Hardy role and performance. I wouldn't hold it up as Tom doing anything super great. We know how good he can be, but this is just kind of overly indulgent because, as you were saying, he's hard to understand a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And there's obviously my other interest is of everything going on with Josh Trank himself. But yeah, in terms of a movie, it's actually a much more familiar biopic formula than you would expect from something that has all these psychological detours. So it's I in one sense I give Trank a lot of credit for taking this kind of swing as his comeback film, but yeah, it doesn't really hit.
Yeah. So this was pushed back. Hardy said he was going to do this, I think, in 2018, and then he ended up doing Venom. So then this became the thing he did after Venom. And I felt like there was some hype around it, but the name change from being Fonzo to or Fonz to Capone, just like stuff around it. And I was like, the more I hear these things changing, being pushed back, the less and less optimistic I feel. And obviously, Trank, you kind of alluded, has had some very famous public meltdowns on set and just failures as a director in general. Um, and I was really left from this movie just being like, I like the idea of taking the last hour of The Irishman basically in concept and being like, how can we like show like the after effect of this uh, mythical mobster who
Right.
was one of the most famous people in the world while also simultaneously being one of the biggest criminals in the world, and has still continued to be a huge portion of the zeitgeist. People, so, the name is going to live on in infamy. And seeing how that person really broke down, and reports say that he had the mentality of a 12-year-old in this last year. Like, he really had just deteriorated by the syphilis infection. That's a really interesting concept, but I think to kind of mask it behind this intelligible lead who's giving an interesting performance. It's hard to say if it was good. I think moments I was really intrigued by, moments I just was like, what is going on here? But where it really fell flat for me was building in this other son who there's no real historical reports of there being another son. This was like totally fictionalized part of the story, trying to drive home this like relationship with his family that they are very caring about him, but he doesn't really seem to have any interest in them, and whether that's related to the syphilis rot or just like kind of how he felt in general. I mean, historical reports say him and his wife had a really good relationship, but I didn't really feel like there was obviously any chemistry between Cardellini and Hardy here. Even the moment when he's like, I love you, and she's like, what? Like, felt very much kind of like she was like, are you saying, like, do you really mean this? Like, felt very odd. And then it just felt like it also was kind of around this idea of like, he was obviously going insane and paranoid and saying he had this money hidden that we don't know if he did or did not. And that whole part also just kind of felt like a mess and kind of thrown in. So it just didn't feel very well cooked to me. But there were some really good ideas in here, and I like the concept. Just feel like it really wasn't executed well. I don't know. I guess like as I'm kind of rambling through my thoughts, I just felt like there was a lot of potential for it to be good and to hit, and so many pieces of it just weren't taken in the direction to pull it all together well.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Cardellini, who, if you want to see her, watch Dead to Me on Netflix. But like, it's kind of a thankless wife role, which is disappointing because May Capone is kind of this enigmatic figure. Not a lot was really known about her, particularly post the death of Al. So the fact that we couldn't get more out of that, I think, is just kind of disappointing. You have Jack Lowden here, who's, being an FBI agent, kind of giving the exact same performance as the dude in Seabird gave. It was like kind of reminding me. I was like, I had to remind myself it wasn't the same actor, but I was like, wait, I haven't seen this guy already. And then you have like stuff like Matt Dillon. Cool to see Matt Dillon. There's like a sight gag where he gouges out his eyes that has really no impact. It's literally just a sight gag. And like a lot of the psychological stuff, we're going through his detours and hallucinations and stuff. They don't thematically matter. They're just kind of detours, and they don't really do anything. And that's kind of not good.
Yeah.
And like Trank was happy that he had final cut on this. This is a movie that he had independently financed, made for very little money, and shopped around, and then just kind of more or less was independently released with some small partners. And maybe if we had more cooks in the kitchen helping rein in Josh Trank's vision, the results are different. I'm not sure. Ultimately, Josh Trank, I just kind of think of him as the most tragic of these like relatively young directors that after one moment of stardom or success immediately get thrown into franchise projects. I mean, Trank, of course, released Chronicle, 2012,
Yep.
fantastic film. Immediately makes Fantastic Four with Fox, which is a huge debacle. This also happened with Gareth Edwards. He makes Monsters, then immediately makes Godzilla 2014. Colin Trevorrow, Safety Not Guaranteed, Jurassic World. Kathy Yan makes Dead Pigs, a movie so small, didn't even get U.S. distribution. Next thing we know, she's making Birds of Prey. Ryan Coogler, Fruitvale Station. You know what? Let's do Creed, a Rocky reboot. Like, this happens all the time. Chloe Zhao, she actually made 2 movies, and then she got to do Eternals. Like, this is happening all the time. And Trank is like the just the cautionary tale.
Yeah.
Because he also, of course, was fired from the 3rd Star Wars spinoff that was rumored to perhaps be Boba Fett. I believe he was the very first of the now long line of people being fired or cast aside by Lucasfilm. Gareth Edwards and Trevorrow are also in that camp.
Yep.
So Trank, though, you know, like he comes across, I think, kind of well in some of the press he's done, but overall, he just kind of released a indulgent movie that needed more reworking and editing and stuff. And you understand why Hollywood's not super interested in him, at least in his current approach. So I don't know.
Yeah. You know, even thinking about the climax of the movie, which shows Capone coming out of one of those lucid states, and he actually has a Tommy gun made of gold, and it shows him having a fantasy where he kills a lot of people and goes around and is kind of just like shooting up everybody at this compound that he's at. And in reality, he shot one guy in the knee with it and then fell over, and it seems like he kind of passed out or something like that. But it just felt like kind of what they were going for with this film, which I think was showing a more reflective gangster at the point of his life where he's like, look at all these awful things I did. You know, you see him really appalled at one of his henchmen as they stab Johnny Torrio in the neck, you know, played by Matt Dillon. And you see him, I think the whole theme with Johnny kind of pulling his eyes out type of thing and leaving it is supposed to like kind of leave him with that, like, you know, you kind of have to live with these demons, and these things you've done are always going to follow you, always going to be watching you. You're going to feel like you're carrying them around all the time. And then you kind of just see him wishing he could just go back into that monster he was. And I just feel like for what he was kind of trying to say about Capone and where the arc was going, to then have that be like the final like climactic scene in a way, I was just kind of like, it was kind of like the scene earlier where he just like shit the bed. Like, it really just felt like that. I do have to say, though, one really interesting part was hearing Capone do a little bit of movie criticism with The Wizard of Oz, getting a private screening. I would love to get Capone on the pod to hear some of his movie takes. He seemed to be really breaking it down.
Yeah, it's a movie.
He's the king of the forest.
He found his courage.
Yeah. that was I loved that part, and then just singing it, just so ridiculous. So Dave, just we were talking before the pod, but I wanted to get this on air. This year for movies, obviously the movie theaters are shut down, so we haven't seen a lot of the movies we were hoping to have seen at this point, so this list could look very different. Not a great year. I think the lows of the lows have been really low this year. Follow us on Letterboxd, but I think I have 5 to 6 films already that got 1.5 or lower for me, and Capone being one of them. Pretty disappointing year, and we're not sure what the landscape's going to look like as long as reopening is going this slowly.
Yeah, it does seem there seems to be more poor movies that we actually sought out than normal. Obviously, most of the good movies are saved for the end of the year normally, but yeah, there's been more stinkers that I actually was planning to watch than normal. So yeah,
quarantine.
That's disappointing given the circumstances. You would have wished that wasn't the case, but there's still been a lot of good stuff. So if you're looking for actually good things to rent, like Extremely Rarely, Sometimes Always, we'd recommend The Assistant. There's plenty of good stuff out there. So
COVID-19, man, 2020. Anyways, Dave, we should wrap up there. What should the people be doing for next week?
We'll talk about the Perfume Genius album that is out now, as well as the 4th, I believe, album from the 1975, Pat's favorite band. The Lovebirds, the Issa Rae, Kamal and Johnny comedy that was sold by, I believe, Paramount, Warner, I forgot who had it, to Netflix. That'll be on Netflix on Friday. And of course, HBO's Run will be ending on Sunday. So we'll talk about those things, maybe some other things as well. But yeah, the culture continues still. You know, we haven't had the bottom fall out just yet. So that'll probably come if we stay in quarantine a long more time. That'll happen, but not yet.
Not yet. Not today. Wear your masks. See you next week.